The wall of names was in the corridor between the mess hall and the launch bays, which meant every cadet at Sodalis Academy walked past it 4 times a day, and none of them ever read it. Wren Calloway read it. She read it the way she read everything, which was slowly, with her lips almost moving, because she had learned to read late and had never entirely forgiven the fact. She stood in front of the polished basalt slab with her ration tray balanced on one hip and her boots planted in the traffic lane, and she read the names from the top left corner down, one at a time, while 300 cadets flowed around her like water around a stone. 52 names. They were not arranged by species, or by year, or by squad. They were arranged alphabetically, which struck her as the most bloodless thing she had ever seen. Adaran Sura, Belliquist Tomos, Chivchivnan, who had only one name and had needed no other. Down and down the slab, letter after letter, 40 standard years of them, cut in a serif face so restrained it might have been a list of donors. At the top, in letters no larger than the names themselves, the slab said, "In honor of those who met the trial and were not diminished." Wren had been at Sodalis for 11 months, and in 11 months she had asked 4 separate instructors what that sentence was supposed to mean, and had received 4 separate answers, none of which had been an answer. "You're blocking the lane, human." She stepped aside without looking. A file of second years went by, Kethani mostly, their crestrages lacquered for inspection. One of them glanced at the slab as he passed, the barest tick of the eye, a half-second, and Wren thought, "He doesn't see it either. It's furniture. It's been furniture his whole life." The last name on the wall had been cut 18 months ago. Yeren Voss, a Thal girl from the deep gravity colonies, 19 years old, 3rd in her class in navigation. Wren had never met her. Wren had, however, read the incident summary, because the incident summaries were public and nobody read those either. Candidate deviated from the recommended traverse and was unable to recover position. Cause of loss, candidate error. Every one of them. 52 summaries, 40 years, and every single one of them ended in those 2 words. Wren Calloway was 17 years old. She was small for a human and small for anything else, all elbows and stubbornness, with her hair cropped down to a rough dark fuzz, because in a habitat you did not waste water on hair. She had grown up on Coriolis 9, an ore processing station that hung in the dark around a gas giant nobody had bothered to name, and she had learned 3 things there before she was 10 years old. 1. Air is not free. 2. Air is a machine, and machines are maintained by people, and people lie about maintenance. 3. When the machine fails, it does not fail on the people who lied. She had learned the 3rd one on a Tuesday in the 9th year of her life, when the scrubber stack on Coriolis 9's bearing had gone soft. 11 people had died. Her mother had been one of them. The inquiry had found that the deaths were, in the language of the inquiry, consistent with a failure of individual vigilance among the residents. Candidate error, resident error. There was always a word for it, and the word was always the same word wearing a different coat. Wren put down her tray, took out her stylus, and wrote a name from the wall on the back of her hand. Then another, then another. She had 11 of them memorized already. She had 38 days until the trial. They called it the Trial of Ascent, but nobody called it that. Cadets called it the sieve, and instructors called it the sieve when they thought no cadets were listening. And once, in an assembly, the rector had used the word from the podium, and then smiled at the laughter as though he had made a joke and not confessed something. The shape of it was simple, and the simplicity was the point. Every candidate for line commission was dropped, in squads of 4, onto the surface of Halberd, a battered gray moon in a system that had never been worth naming either, with a suit, a beacon, 4 days of consumables, and 111 kilometers of terrain between them and the extraction point. There was no combat element. There were no adversaries. There was nothing on Halberd that wanted to hurt anyone, because There was nothing on Halberd that was alive. There was only the ground, and the cold and the air. Halberd had an atmosphere, which was the whole grim joke of it. It had a dense, sluggish, sulphur-yellow atmosphere that pooled in its valleys like water in a bowl, and it had been surveyed once, 61 years ago, by a Concord prospecting cutter that had spent 9 days in orbit and 1 afternoon on the ground and had gone away again forever. That survey said the valley air was lethal. Not asterisk harmful, not asterisk hazardous with mitigation. Lethal, a triple-bonded polysulfide compound that laughed at standard filtration, that stripped lung tissue in 90 seconds, that could not be scrubbed by any cartridge a cadet could carry. The survey said it in 1 paragraph, and it had been said ever since, in every briefing, in every handbook, in every solemn pre-drop lecture for 61 years. Which left the ridges. The route from the drop zone to the extraction beacon ran along the high spine of the Kessar Escarpment, 111 kilometers of exposed basalt at an average altitude of 2,000 meters above the valley floor, above the yellow, above the death. It was walkable. It had been walked hundreds of times. It was also, for 11 weeks of every Halberd year, in the teeth of a katabatic wind system that came off the polar ice at velocities the handbook described as asterisk variable. The handbook used the word variable, the way the memorial slab used the word asterisk honor. 52 cadets had fallen off the Kessar Escarpment, or been pinned on it until their consumables ran out, or been blown into a crevasse, or simply sat down on it in a whiteout and stopped moving. 52 in 40 years. A little more than 1 a year. A number that was, if you squinted, small enough to live with, and Sodalis Academy had been squinting for 4 decades. Wren had run the numbers 3 times, because she did not trust herself with numbers the first time. 1,200 candidates over 40 years. 52 dead. 1 in 23. She had put her stylus down when she got that figure and sat very still in the archive carrel for a long time, and then she had gone and stood in front of the wall again, and counted the names to make sure the arithmetic had a body attached to every digit. "You're doing it again," said Perry. Peregrine Oduya was the other human in the class, the only other human, a lanky boy from Earth's Lagrange yards with wide hands and a permanently apologetic face. He was the best comms technician in 3 cohorts, and he was afraid of the sieve in a way he had never once said out loud. "They don't lock the archive," Wren said. "That's the part I keep getting stuck on. They don't lock any of it. The incident summaries are public. The survey is public. The wall is asterisk in the corridor. They're not hiding it. So people only hide things they're ashamed of." She turned her hand over and looked at the names smudged on the back of it. "They're not ashamed. They think it's asterisk fine." Squad 9 was 4, as all squads were 4. Wren, Perry, and 2 who were not human. Suravan was a thou, 3 meters of patient muscle bred over 9 generations for a world that pulled at 1.8 gravities, with a broad gray face and small, kind, extremely tired eyes. She could carry a loaded suit frame in each arm and had never in her life raised her voice, and she spoke Concord standard slowly, as if each word cost her something and she wanted to be sure it was worth the price. And there was Ket Anavar. Ket was Kethani, which meant tall and narrow and crested, with the long jaw and the dark eyes and the immaculate posture that the Kethani had made into a civilization. She was first in the cohort in every subject that could be graded, and she made no secret of considering Squad 9 an administrative insult. She had been assigned to them in the lottery, and she had accepted it the way one accepts weather. Ket's brother had walked the Kessar Escarpment 9 years ago and come off it with a commission and a citation and a permanent tremor in his left hand that he told people was nothing. Ket did not talk about that. Ket talked about the trial the way you talk about a mountain you intend to summit, as a thing that was hard and was supposed to be hard, and whose hardness was the source of its worth. 1 in 23, Wren said to her once in the study block, laying the figures out flat on the table between them. Ket looked at them for perhaps 4 seconds. And 22 in 23 walk off that ridge knowing exactly what they are. My brother came home from Halberd and he was asterisk finished. He was made. You want to take that away from people because you can do division. I want to take it away from people because asterisk 52 people are dead. 52 people who were not equal to it. Ket said it without heat, and that was the horror of it. She said it the way you would state a tied table. That is what a sieve is asterisk for. If everyone passed, it would not be a test. It would be a ceremony. And Wren, who had spent 11 months learning to hold her tongue and had not gotten very good at it, said, "Then why do the summaries all say the same 2 words?" Ket blinked. Every one of them, 40 years. 52 dead cadets, 52 incident summaries, and every single one ends with asterisk cause of loss, candidate error, not one equipment fault, not one weather call. Not one asterisk maybe we shouldn't have sent them up there that week. You're first in statistics, Ket. Tell me the odds that an institution runs a lethal exercise for 4 decades and is never, not once, even a little asterisk bit at fault. Ket Anavar got up and gathered her slate and left, and her spine was very straight all the way to the door. But she did not answer, and Wren watched her go and thought she heard it. The pre-drop briefing was held in the vaulted hall, under the banners, because Sodalis did everything under the banners. 64 cadets, 16 squads. They sat in ranks on the cold stone benches in their liners with their helmets in their laps, and the rector said the things rectors say, and then he stepped back and gave the floor to the examiner. Proctor Adjutant Vel Thessarin had run the trial of ascent for 22 years. He was old for a Cathani. His crest had gone the pale gray of weathered bone, and he walked with a stick he did not need and used as a pointer, and he had a voice like a hand closing on a wrist. He had been decorated 4 times. He had lost, by Wren's count, 31 cadets on his watch, and he had never once been asked to account for a single one of them, and there was a portrait of him in the eastern gallery in which he was smiling. He did not use notes, he never had. 64 of you, he said, will go down to Halberd. This is the 91st running of the trial of ascent. In the 90th, 1 candidate did not return. In the 88th, 2. I tell you this not to frighten you, but because you are not children, and I refuse to speak to you as though you were. You will be dropped at the eastern terminus of the Kessar Escarpment. You will proceed west along the high traverse to the extraction beacon at Point Sarn. 111 kilometers, 96 hours of consumables. Your suits will keep you alive. Your legs will get you there. Your judgment will decide which of those 2 fails you first. Behind him the great display came alive, and there was Halberd. Gray spine, yellow valleys, a moon that looked like a thing that had been beaten. You will hear in the coming days a voice in your head that suggests you descend. It will come when the wind is worst. It will tell you that the valley is sheltered, and the walking is easy, and the air down there is only air. He let the pause open. The air down there is not air. It is a triple-bonded polysulfide at 400 parts per million, and it will take your lungs apart in 90 seconds. There is no filter in your kit that will touch it. There is no mask, no cartridge, no clever trick. Cadets have gone down into the yellow. None of them have come back up. He tapped the stick once against the stone. The ridge is hard. The valley is final. Anyone who cannot hold that distinction in their head under duress has no business on a bridge. You will be observed. Drones will maintain overwatch. Understand what overwatch means. It means we will see you. It does not mean we will reach you. There is no rescue on Halberd. There has never been a rescue on Halberd. If you sit down on that ridge, you will die on that ridge, and a drone will watch you do it and record the time, and I will write your name on a slab and I will mean every letter of it. Somebody in the 3rd rank made a small sound. Thessarin's dark eyes went to them, and rested there, and softened by perhaps a degree. "I am not cruel," he said, and Wren believed with a cold, sinking certainty that he believed it. "I am honest. Every other institution in this Concord will lie to you about what the void costs and give you a ribbon. Sodalis will take you to a place that does not care whether you live, and it will let that place tell you the truth about yourself, and you will carry that truth for the rest of your service, and it will save ships. That is the covenant. 52 of your predecessors paid for it in full, and I will not have their memory insulted by softness." He straightened, the stick came up. "You are dismissed to the bays." They filed out under the banners, and the file took them, as it took everyone, along the corridor between the mess and the launch bays, past the wall. Wren stopped. She was not the only one. A few of them slowed, the way you slow at an accident. But she was the only one who stopped and turned and stood in her drop liner with her helmet under her arm, and looked at the 52 names as though she were checking a list against an inventory. Cadet Anavar stopped beside her. Wren had not expected that. For a while neither of them said anything. "Cadets have gone down into the yellow," Wren said at last quietly. "None of them have come back up. He said that to frighten us. He said it because it's true." Wren's eyes moved along the slab. "That's what's been bothering me for a month, Ket, and I couldn't get my hands round it, and he just handed it to me from the podium. It's true. Some of them did go down. Whenever it got bad enough, somebody always went down. Of course they did, people do. That's what people are, and none of them ever came back." Ket's crestridge tightened, which proves his point. "No," said Wren. "It proves they never came back up. That's all it proves. That's all it proves." She turned her head and looked up a long way up into the Kethani girl's face. "Nobody's ever gone down there and walked out the other side, Ket, in 61 years. Not once. There's no data. There's a survey from a ship that spent one afternoon in the dirt before either of our grandmothers was born, and there's a rule, and the rule has been fed by the rule. Calloway, and every cadet who ever tested it," Wren said, "is on this wall, so nobody ever got to say what they found." The corridor emptied around them. Somewhere ahead, the bay doors were cycling. She could feel the pressure change in her ears. Cadet Anavar looked at the slab. Really looked at it, for what Wren suspected was the first time in her life. Read a name, and then another, the way you read a thing that has a body attached to every digit. "You are going to do something appalling," she said. "I'm going to take a reading," said Wren Calloway, and put on her helmet. Halberd took them at dawn, if you could call it dawn. The drop craft came in low over the eastern terminus and spat 16 squads out along 4 kilometers of ridgeline in a staggered line, 60 seconds apart, so that no squad could see another squad and every squad would believe itself alone. That was deliberate. Thessarin had said so in the pre-brief proudly. "You will not have company. You will have yourselves." Squad 9 came down on a shelf of black basalt the size of a hangar deck, and the ramp dropped, and the wind hit them like a door. Wren went to one knee before she knew she was doing it. Her suit's exterior mic clipped instantly into a flat white roar. Grit went past her faceplate horizontally in long tearing streaks, and the sky was the color of an old bruise, low and moving fast, and below the shelf on both sides, the ground simply ended. The Kessar Escarpment was a knife. That was the thing the maps did not communicate. On the map it was a line. Standing on it, it was a spine of rock 200 meters wide at its most generous and 11 meters wide at its worst, with a 2,000-meter drop on the north side into shadow and a 2,000-meter drop on the south side into yellow. And there was the yellow. Wren got up and turned and looked south, and there it was, an ocean of it. A slow, opaque, saffron-colored sea filling the valley from wall to wall, its surface rolling in enormous soft folds like something breathing in its sleep. It was, she thought, with a lurch of something she could not name, the only beautiful thing on this entire moon. 90 seconds, she thought. He said 90 seconds. The drop craft lifted, and then it was gone. Squad 9, said Ket Anavar on the local channel, form on me. Standard interval. Von breaks wind at point, Oduya second, Calloway third, I take rear. We make 26 kilometers today or we do not eat tomorrow. Nobody argued. Ket was squad leader because Ket had been first in the cohort in everything gradable and because, Wren had to admit it, roped in behind Sura Von's colossal windbreak with her boots skidding on frost-slick stone. Ket was asterisk good. She read the ground. She called the gusts before they landed. When the traverse pinched down to a shelf as wide as a bench and Perry froze up solid with his hands locked on the rock, it was Ket who went back for him and talked him across in a flat, bored voice about drill regulations, until his feet moved on their own. They made 24 kilometers on the first day. Ket logged it as 26. The suits were where it started. Wren noticed it on the second morning in the gray hour before the light, when she woke inside her shelter bag with her hip aching against the rock and found herself, as she had done every day since she was 9 years old, checking her air. The suit gave you a status ribbon across the bottom of the faceplate: pressure, temperature, consumables, power, and on the far right in a little amber box that never changed, the environmental hazard read: EXT, ATMOSPOLSULPHIDT3, lethal, do not vent. Wren looked at it for a while. Then she said to nobody, that's not a number. Perry stirred in his bag. The hazard box. She tapped her faceplate uselessly with a gloved finger. Everything else on this ribbon is a number, pressure's a number, temp's a number, power's a percentage. The hazard box just says lethal asterisk. It doesn't say asterisk how lethal. It doesn't give me a concentration. Because it's lethal, said Perry, muffled, not opening his eyes. What more do you want, a decimal place? Yes, said Wren, that is exactly what I want. She lay there in the dark with the wind hammering the shelter fabric flat against her shoulder, and she thought about the scrubber stack on Coriolis 9's B-ring, and the alarm panel that had shown the same 3 green numbers for 6 years, because the sensor behind it had died in its socket, and nobody had ever asked the panel to prove it was still listening. A display that tells you what it is supposed asterisk to say is not a sensor. It is a poster. She started asking the suit questions on the third day. The cadet suits ran a locked instructional shell that showed you exactly what Sodalis wanted you to see, and the diagnostic layer underneath was gated behind a maintenance interlock. But Wren Calloway had grown up on a station where the difference between a working scrubber and a decorative one was the difference between her mother and a name on an inquiry, and she had been taking the covers off of things since she was 6. And she had Perry. You want me to root a asterisk Concorde suit, Perry said. On the asterisk trial, with a drone overhead. I want you to get me into the sensor stack. That's the same sentence. They had stopped in the lee of a rock tower, all 4 of them wedged into a pocket of relative calm about the size of a supply closet, chewing paste out of tubes while the wind screamed past the opening at what the suit generously called asterisk variable. The interlock is for asterisk safety asterisk, Ket said. The interlock is so we can't see the raw feed, Wren said, which is either a safety feature or a asterisk very asterisk convenient coincidence, and I've stopped believing in convenient coincidences. The maintenance port's under the left forearm plate. Give me 4 minutes with your slate. And if the drone logs it? Then the drone logs it, Wren looked up. Somewhere above the rushing murk, a Sodalis Overwatch drone was holding station at 800 meters and had been for 3 days patient as a vulture. They're asterisk watching us die asterisk up there, Perry. They've been watching cadets die up there for 40 years and writing it down. I'm not scared of being observed anymore. I'm scared of being summarized. Perry Oduya looked at her for a long moment. Then he unshipped his slate and said, "Left forearm, hold still." It took him 19 minutes, not 4, and by the end his hands were shaking so badly with cold that Sura had to hold the slate steady in her 2 vast fingers. But the interlock on a cadet suit was not built to defeat a determined attacker. It was built to stop a bored teenager from turning off their own alarms. The diagnostic layer opened, and Wren Calloway looked at the raw sensor feed from her own suit, and the world tilted very quietly under her. There were 4 environmental channels. 3 of them were live. Pressure, a number updating twice a second, wobbling as the gusts came. Temperature, a number. Particulates, a number. The 4th channel, the polysulfide channel, the one that fed the little amber box that said lethal, was a number 2. The number was 0. Not 0 as in asterisk below threshold. 0 as in asterisk CH4. No sensor present, value asserted from manifest. Ref. Survey Doc 61 Halberd ATMOS, Section 4. Wren read it 4 times. Then she sat down on the cold rock in the howling gray and laughed once, a short, ugly, unfunny sound that startled Perry badly. "There's no sensor," she said. "What?" "There's no asterisk sensor asterisk, Perry." She turned the slate around so he could see it. Her hand was very steady now. She noticed that with distant interest. It had stopped shaking the moment she understood. "There has never been asterisk a sensor. Nobody has measured the air on this moon since the survey. Not once. The suits don't measure it. The drones don't measure it. That amber box on your faceplate isn't telling you what the air is. It's telling you what a prospecting cutter wrote down 61 years ago, and everyone has been copying out of the same book ever since." Ket Anavar had gone very still. "That is not possible," she said, and her voice cracked down the middle, and she got it back under control with an effort Wren could see in the muscles of her jaw. "The Concord does not run a lethal exercise on unverified atmospheric data. There are asterisk standards. There is a whole asterisk directorate asterisk." "There is a whole directorate," Wren agreed, "and I'll bet you my rations that every document it holds on Halberd's atmosphere cites the same source, and the source cites the survey, and the survey is asterisk one afternoon in the dirt in the year 61. That's not a lie, Ket. That's worse than a lie. A lie has to be told on purpose. This is just nobody ever asked." She looked up past the rock at the drone she could not see. Nobody ever asked, and it worked, because it made the test hard, and hard was the point. And every single person who ever went down there to find out for themselves is on the wall in the corridor. Suravan spoke. It was the first thing she had said in 6 hours, and her slow voice filled the pocket like poured stone. "Then the air," she said, "may be safe." "No," said Wren. "The air may be asterisk anything. That's the whole thing. That's the asterisk whole asterisk thing. It might be exactly what the survey says and I'd walk down there and die in 90 seconds and deserve it, or it might have changed. 61 years is nothing to a planet, but this isn't a planet. It's a dead vent moon with a cracked mantle, and if the sulfur vents that were charging that valley sealed themselves any time in the last 6 decades, she stopped, made herself slow down. I don't asterisk no asterisk. That's my point. Nobody knows. 52 people are dead on a ridge because nobody knows and everybody's asterisk certain. Ket said quietly, "So find out." Wren turned her head. The Kethani girl was standing with her back to the rock, her helmet lights throwing hard shadows up her long face, and her hands were open at her sides. "You have made an accusation," Ket Anavar said, "against an institution my family has served for 4 generations, against a man who taught my brother. You have done it on the strength of 1 line of diagnostic text on a rock in a storm." Her jaw worked. "So find out, not with a speech, not when we get home in a hearing where they will bury you in procedure and you will lose. Here, now, where I can see it." And Wren Calloway said, "Yes." They did not go down that day. They went down 4 kilometers further west on the 4th morning, because that was where the escarpment threw out a long broken buttress toward the valley floor, a staircase of collapsed shelves, ugly and slow but climbable, and because Wren had spent the whole of the previous night lying awake in her bag, doing something she had learned from her mother and had never told anybody about. She was building a test that could not lie to her. It had 4 parts, and she wrote each of them out on the inside of her forearm with a stylus, in her slow, careful hand, and she made Perry check them, because a person who is about to bet their life on their own reasoning should not be the only auditor of that reasoning. 1. Go down alone, nobody else on the buttress, nobody below. If the reasoning is wrong, only one person is wrong. 2. Take the sample before taking the risk. Sacrificial canister, vent it, run it through the suit's particulate channel and the medkit's reagent strips. If the reagents burn, turn around. 3. Descend in stages. 20 meters at a time, hold, read. If any number moves in a bad direction, go up. 4. The seal comes last. The seal comes only if everything else says yes, and only within 30 seconds of a climb that can be made on one breath. That's not a test, Perry said, reading it. That's a asterisk ladder out of the well. That's what a test is, said Wren. Everything else is just gambling with a clipboard. The buttress was worse than it looked. She went down through the standing wind first, on rope, with Sir Yvonne's fists locked around the anchor and Sir Yvonne's voice in her ear saying, every 90 seconds with total calm, I have you, Calloway, I have you. Then the wind fell off. That was the strangest part. It fell off in the space of about 40 meters of descent, from a scream to a murmur to a hush, and the silence was so sudden and so total that Wren's ears rang with it. And the light changed. Above, everything was bruised gray and flying grit. Down here, as she came into the top of the yellow, the sunlight came through the haze and turned the color of honey, and every rock, every fracture, every crystal of frost on the buttress wall lit up gold. It was, she thought again, and hated herself a little for thinking it, beautiful. At 180 meters below the ridgeline, on a shelf of rock the size of a table, Wren Calloway stopped and did what she had come to do. She unclipped the sacrificial canister, a spare consumables cylinder, emptied and cracked its valve, and let it fill with halberds air and closed it again. She put a reagent strip in the intake and watched the strip. The strip did not burn. The strip went pale rose, which meant sulfur compounds present low. She ran it again with a fresh strip because one reading is a rumor, pale rose. She ran the canister through her suit's particulate channel, and the number that came back was 71 parts per million. Not 400. 71. Wren Calloway crouched on a rock 180 meters down into a valley that had killed 52 people, and she read a number off a strip of paper, and the number said that everything she had been told since the day she arrived at Sodalis Academy was 61 years out of date. She sat back on her heels. Above her, invisible in the haze, the Overwatch drone had come down off its station and was descending after her, and its floodlight came on and swung through the honey-colored murk, hunting and found her and pinned her. And the examiner's voice came through her helmet, not on the squad channel, not on the emergency band, but on the command override that no cadet had ever heard used in the field, and it filled her skull like a hand closing on a wrist. Cadets CALLOWAY, you are below the traverse line. This is Proctor Adjutant THSSARIN. You will return to the ridge immediately. Wren did not move. Cadet, you have 90 seconds of life and I am watching you spend them. Return to the ridge. She looked at the strip in her hand. Pale rose. 71 parts per million. 61 years. 52 names alphabetical, in a corridor between the mess hall and the launch bays, that nobody read. Slowly, without hurry, Cadet Wren Calloway stood up on the shelf in the golden air and turned her faceplate up into the drone's floodlight. so that the lens could see her clearly, so that the man behind the lens could see her clearly, so that the recording could see her clearly and hold her there forever. And she smiled. It was not a happy smile. Nobody who saw the footage afterward, and, eventually, a very great number of people saw the footage afterward, ever called it a happy smile. It did not reach her eyes, which were red-rimmed and exhausted and hard as ball bearings. It was the smile of somebody who has spent 11 months being told she is stupid for asking, and has just been handed the proof, and knows exactly what it is going to cost her, and is going to do it anyway. It was aimed at one man, and it said one thing, and it did not need words. "I've got you." Then Wren Calloway reached up with one hand and released the seal on her helmet. She did not take the helmet off. That was important, and it mattered later in the hearing, when a great deal of energy was spent trying to make her out to be a lunatic who had thrown her life at a wall to make a point. She did not take the helmet off. She cracked the seal by one detent, the smallest movement the mechanism allowed, a quarter turn, a hiss, and she let Halberd in through a gap the width of a fingernail, and she stood there with her hand on the ring and her thumb on the reseal, 30 seconds from a rope she had checked twice. The air came in cold, and it smelled like a struck match. It hit the back of her throat and made her cough, a hard, whole-body cough that doubled her over and made her eyes stream. And for one long second, kneeling on the rock with the drone's floodlight blazing on her back, Wren Calloway believed that she had been wrong and was about to die, and that the wall in the corridor would carry 53 names, and that Perry would have to watch. Then the cough eased. Then it eased again. Her chest hurt. It hurt the way it hurt to breathe on the upper decks of Coriolis 9 when the ventilation was tired, a raw scoured feeling at the top of the lungs, sulfur and cold. It was not pleasant. It was not safe exactly. She knew even then that a week of it would put you in a bed. It was not 90 seconds. She counted out loud, because she did not trust her own sense of time with her heart going like that. At 60 seconds she was still breathing. At 90 seconds, at the sacred number, the number that had been said from the podium under the banners for 61 years, Wren Calloway was still on her feet in the golden haze, with her lungs burning and her eyes running and her hand shaking on the helmet ring, alive. At 120 seconds she resealed, because she was not a fool, and dumped the suit's reserve, and watched it scrub her contaminated air out in 11 seconds flat with a standard cartridge. The cartridge every cadet on that ridge had 2 spares of in their pack, the cartridge that a proctor adjutant of the Concord had told 64 children could not touch this compound. 11 seconds. She stood in the honey-colored light and breathed her own clean air, and she thought about Yaren Voss, 19 years old, 3rd in her class in navigation, who had been blown off the Kessar Escarpment 18 months ago in a wind the handbook called *variable*, 400 meters above an atmosphere that would have made her cough. That was when she stopped being frightened and started being something else. Calloway. The override again, and there was something in it now that had not been there before. It was not quite anger. "Cadet, report your status." "You know my status." Her voice came out ruined and rasping. "You've got a drone with a spectrometer on it 11 meters from my face, sir. You've known my status longer than I have." The floodlight did not move. "Sir," said Wren, looking up into the lens, "how long has the drone package included an atmospheric spectrometer? Because it's a standard fit. It's been a standard fit on that airframe for 19 years. It's in the maintenance manual. I read the maintenance manual, sir, because I'm from a habitat and that's what we do. We read the manuals for the machines that keep us alive." Her breath hitched. She let it. "So that drone has been able to read this air for 19 years, which means either nobody ever turned the channel on." "Cadet." "Or somebody did," said Wren Calloway, "and the number came back wrong and it got * filed. The floodlight snapped off. For a moment there was nothing but the drifting gold and the enormous hush of the valley, and the small tick of her own suit. Then Thessarin's voice came back, and it was flat and formal and very careful, and she understood with a lurch of pure cold that she had just watched a man decide, in real time, to save an institution instead of a child. Cadet Calloway, you have deviated from the mandated traverse and breached the integrity of Concord equipment during an active evaluation. You are hereby disqualified from the trial of ascent. Your beacon is deactivated. Your squad is instructed to disregard your transmissions and continue west along the ridge to Point Sarn. Extraction will occur at the scheduled hour for qualified candidates only. Wren stared up into the dark lens. Sir, there are 63 cadets up there, and there's a catabatic front coming off the pole tonight. I can see the sheer line from Asterisk down here. Extraction, said Proctor Adjutant Vel Thessarin, will occur at the scheduled hour for qualified candidates only. And the drone turned and rose and went back up into the gray. Wren climbed. It took her 50 minutes, and it was the hardest thing she had ever done. And when she came up over the lip of the buttress into the wind, she could not stand, so she crawled, and Suravan came out of the shelter of the rock tower and picked her up off the stone like a sack of grain and carried her in. They put her down, they got her faceplate clear. Perry was saying her name, over and over, in a voice that had gone up into a register she had never heard from him. Ket Anavar knelt in front of her and took her by both shoulders and said, "Numbers." Wren dragged in a breath. 71, she said. Parts per million, not 400. Reagent strip pale rose twice, fresh strip both times. I cracked the seal for 2 minutes. She saw Ket's crest go rigid. 2 minutes, Ket, not 90 seconds. 2 minutes and the standard cartridge scrubbed it out of my suit in 11. It's survivable. It's foul. It's sulfur. It'll wreck your throat and I wouldn't want to sleep in it, but you can asterisk walk in it. You can walk 100 kilometers in it with a suit that works and come out the other end coughing. Nobody said anything. The wind screamed past the mouth of the pocket, and somewhere out there, 100 kilometers of knife-edge basalt ran west into a sky that was going the color of a bad bruise, and on that knife-edge were 15 other squads. He disqualified me, Wren said. He killed my beacon. We heard, said Perry. He told you to leave me and walk west. We heard that too, said Perry, and I'd like to formally note that I have never in my life been so disgusted. Perry. And also that I'm not going anywhere so. Ket Anavar had not moved. My brother, she said, came off this ridge 9 years ago with a tremor in his left hand. He tells people it is nothing. It is not nothing. He was pinned for 19 hours in a whiteout at kilometer 62 in the open at 40 below because the valley was death and the ridge was the only road. He has not slept a whole night since. He is proud of it. Her fingers tightened on Wren's shoulders. He is proud of it, Calloway, and I was proud of him, and it was for nothing. There was a road. There was a road the whole time, 400 meters below him, and it was warm. She let go and stood and looked out into the wind. Oduya, can you reach the other squads? Perry blinked. Squad channels are short-range line of sight. We're not going to raise anybody past the second bend, but there's the emergency band, which is long-range, which is omnidirectional, which every suit on this moon receives on, always because you can't switch it off, because it's an emergency band. He swallowed. It's a court-martial offense to use it for anything but a distress call. Ket looked back over her shoulder. Then make a distress call, she said. It went out at 1840 local, into the teeth of the front, and every cadet on Halbert heard it, and so did the proctor adjutant, and so did the recorder in the drop craft holding station in orbit, which was, although nobody realized it for another 11 days, a legally sealed evidentiary log that no one on the Sodalis staff had the authority to erase. They made Wren say it, She hadn't wanted to. Ket had said flatly, it has to be the one who breathed it, and that had been that. So Wren Calloway sat with her back against a rock on a dying moon, with her throat scoured raw, and she keyed the emergency band, and she talked to 63 people she could not see. This is Cadet Wren Calloway, Squad 9 on the emergency band. I know what that means. I'll take it. 2 hours ago I went 180 meters down the south buttress at kilometer 31, and I took a sample of the valley air. The briefing said 400 parts per million of a polysulfide that no filter can touch. That's not what's down there. What's down there is 71 parts per million, and my standard cartridge scrubbed it out of my suit in 11 seconds. I cracked my seal for 2 minutes. I'm still talking to you. I'm not telling you it's safe. It isn't. It stinks and it burns and you will cough for a week. I'm telling you it is an asterisk lethal asterisk, and it hasn't been for a long time and nobody checked. There's no polysulfide sensor in your suit. Look for yourself, forearm plate, maintenance port, channel 4. It doesn't measure anything. It just repeats a survey from 61 years ago. There's a front coming off the pole. You've all seen the shear line. The last time a front like this came over the Kessar Traverse, we lost 2 cadets, and the summary said candidate error. 400 meters below you, there is a valley with no wind in it. I'm going down at the buttress at kilometer 31. I'll be at the bottom in an hour and I'll be marking the descent with strobes. If you want to come down, come down. If you don't trust me, don't get into the rocks, dig in, hold on. And I hope to every one of your gods that you're still there when it clears. But if you're in the open when that front lands, and you're standing on a ridge, and you are looking down at a valley you have been told for your whole lives will kill you in 90 seconds. It won't. Calloway out. She let go of the key. The wind howled. And then one by one, out of the static, they started coming back. Squad 4, we're at kilometer 38, we can see your position. Say again the concentration figure. Squad 11, you're insane, Calloway. Squad 11, this is Squad 6, shut up. Calloway, my squad mate's heater is at 40%, and we are 11 hours from Sarn. Say again the concentration. 71 parts per million, said Wren. Say again 71, reagent strip pale rose, standard cartridge 11-second scrub. Squad 2, Calloway, this is a disqualification for everyone who follows you. You understand that? Every single one of us. We'd all be off the board. And it was Ket Anavar who leaned in and keyed the mic, and said, in a voice like a blade being laid on a table. Squad 2, this is Cadet Leader Anavar. First in cohort, top of the board, 4 generations of family service. I'm going down. Do you want to be disqualified with me, or do you want to be first in cohort at my funeral? There was a pause of perhaps 4 seconds. Squad 2, moving to kilometer 31. The command override cut across everything. All candidates. This is Proctor Adjutant THESSARIN. Cadet CALLOWAY is disqualified and her transmissions are unauthorized. The valley atmosphere is lethal. Any candidate departing the mandated traverse will be disqualified and will not be extracted. Hold the ridge. That is an order. And Wren keyed her mic and said, very quietly, to 63 people and 1 man. Sir, turn on the spectrometer. Silence. You've got one on every drone. Turn it on. Read the number out loud on this band right now, and I'll climb back up and take my disqualification and never say another word about it as long as I live. Her voice cracked and she let it. That's all. That's the whole ask. Read us the number. The wind filled the channel. 11 seconds, 20, 30. He did not read the number. And on a ridge 111 kilometers long, 63 exhausted teenagers in failing suits, who had been raised from childhood to trust the voice of the conquered, listened to a Proctor Adjutant refuse to read a number off an instrument he had been carrying the entire time, and something happened in all of them at once that no examiner had ever planned for, and no rubric had ever measured. Squad 7, moving to kilometer 31. Squad 14, moving. Squad 3, we're moving. Squad 11, a long shaky breath. Squad 11, moving. Calloway, if you're wrong. If I'm wrong, said Wren, you'll be the last person who ever has to find out. The front came in at 21:15. Wren was on the buttress when it landed, 40 meters down, hammering strobe stakes into fractured rock with a hand that had stopped being a hand hours ago and was now just a tool she was operating remotely. The wind went from a scream to something with no name at all. It picked up a rock the size of her head and threw it past her shoulder into the yellow. Above her, on the ridge, 63 cadets were converging on a single point in the dark, in a wind that was pulling them sideways, and every one of them was doing it on the word of a 17-year-old girl from a mining station who had cracked her helmet on a rock 2 hours ago because she did not believe a piece of paper. Suravan stood at the anchor at the top of the buttress for 6 hours. 6 hours in the full force of the catabatic front, with her boots spread and her fists on the line and her enormous back to the wind, and she brought them down one at a time. She did not sit. She did not shelter. Every 90 seconds, to whoever was on the rope, she said the same 4 words in the same slow, calm voice, in a register so low it went through the storm instead of over it. I have you climb. Perry Oduya worked the descent line with a slate in his teeth and a broken finger he did not mention until 3 days later. And Ket Anavar went back up the ridge. Nobody asked her to. She looked at the count on Perry's slate, 58 of 64, and the last position report from Squad 13 had been at kilometer 44 in the open, moving badly, and she said, Squad 13 has a broken heater and 2 of them are Kethani, and we do not do well in cold. And she took a rope and a spare cartridge and walked east into the front alone. She was gone for 4 hours and 11 minutes. She came back with 2 of them roped to her and Squad 13's leader on her back, so cold she could not speak, with a fracture in her left ankle that she had walked 11 kilometers on. When Suravan lifted her off her feet at the anchor point, Ket Anavar looked down into the golden haze at the bottom of the buttress, where 60 other cadets stood in a valley that was warm and windless and stinking of struck matches and alive. And she started to laugh, and then she started to weep, and she did both at once for a long time, and nobody thought less of her for it. 64 cadets went on to the Kessar Escarpment on the 91st running of the trial of ascent. At 3:40 local in the roaring dark, the last of them came off it. 64. The valley floor was not what any of them had imagined, because none of them had ever imagined it at all. You do not picture the inside of a coffin. It was flat. That was the first shock. After 4 days on a knife edge where every footfall had to be negotiated, 64 cadets came down onto a plain of old ash and rounded stone that ran west, gently downhill, for as far as the haze allowed anyone to see, and the ground under their boots was *level*, and several of them simply sat down on it and put their heads in their hands. It was quiet. 400 meters above them, the front was tearing itself apart on the Kessar Traverse at velocities that were now going to have to be described by some word other than *variable. A distant, continuous grinding roar, like surf, like a foundry. Down here the air moved at a walking pace, and the loudest sound was breathing. It was warm. Not warm, it was -9, still cold enough to kill anyone who stopped moving for long enough. But it was -9 instead of -41, because the valley held its heat the way a valley does, and every suit heater on that plain went from a red number to an amber one within the hour, and the 11 cadets whose heaters had been dying stopped dying with them. And it stank. It stank of struck matches and rotten eggs, and something underneath that was almost sweet, and it got in through every seal, and it would be in their hair and their packs for a month. Every cadet in that valley coughed, and would go on coughing for 11 days, and 4 of them would need a week in the infirmary for chemical bronchitis, and the medical board's report on that would run to 40 pages. 4 cadets in the infirmary. 64 alive. Wren Calloway stood on the ash with her squad and did the arithmetic she had been doing in her head since she was 9 years old. What did the machine cost, and who paid it? And then she got up on a rock so they could all see her, and she said, "Point Sarn is 80 kilometers that way. Nobody's coming to get us. Get up." They walked for 2.5 days. The extraction beacon at Point Sarn sat on the western terminus of the escarpment, where the ridge came down to meet the valley in a long ramp of scree, which meant, as Perry worked out on the second morning with a stylus in the back of a ration wrapper and a look of dawning outrage, that you could reach it from the valley floor without a single technical climb. 80 kilometers of flat asterisk, he kept saying, and they had us on the knife. They had us on the asterisk knife for 111. Because the knife's harder, said Wren. Why does it need to be harder? She didn't answer, because she had been asking that question for 11 months and had never once received an answer that wasn't a banner. They organized. That was the thing that struck the board of inquiry hardest later, and that made the footage impossible for anybody to spin. 64 teenagers, disqualified, beaconless, unsupported, and nobody panicked. Ket Anavar could not walk. She was carried in shifts on a litter improvised from 2 suit frames and a shelter bag, and she ran the column from it with a broken ankle and a voice like a whip crack. She set the march order, she set the rest intervals, she paired every failing suit with 2 sound ones. Suravan broke trail for 80 kilometers and carried, at various points, 4 separate exhausted cadets and 1 broken litter, and asked for nothing, and slept less than any of them. And Perry Oduya got the emergency band to reach orbit. That took him 19 hours and a scavenged antenna made from 3 tent poles and the strut of a ruined suit frame, and he did it lying on his back on the ash with his broken finger splinted in a ration spoon, cursing steadily and happily, and when he finally got a lock, he did not send a distress call. He sent the data. Every reading Wren had taken, every reagent strip photograph, the raw diagnostic dump showing CH4, no sensor present value asserted from manifest, the suit logs of 64 cadets, time-stamped, showing that every single one of them was alive at the bottom of a valley the Concord said was lethal. He encrypted it under his own cadet key, so that it could be authenticated later and could not be quietly deleted, and he squirted it up to the drop craft's evidentiary log in one long burst at 400 on the 6th day. Then he lay on his back in the golden haze and laughed until he cried. "They can't unsee it," he said when Wren sat down beside him. "That log is sealed, sealed by statute. Thessarin can disqualify us, he can strike us off, he can write whatever he likes in the summary, but he cannot touch that log without a Concord judge's order, and if he tries, it's a felony." He wiped his face, leaving a smear of ash across it. "I've spent 4 days being terrified. I would like to say that I am now having the best morning of my entire life." The other thing that happened in the valley was harder to put in a report. It started on the second night at a rest halt when a Kethani boy from Squad 13, one of the 2 Ket had roped off the ridge, sat down next to Wren in the dark and said, without preamble, "Wren Halavar." Wren looked up. "My cousin, 84th running, kilometer 79. They said he deviated from the traverse and could not recover position. His crest was very still. He was not careless. He was the least careless person I have ever known. He checked the asterisk seals on other people's suits. He was irritating asterisk about it. They gave my aunt a folded flag and a summary with 2 words on it, and she has believed those 2 words for 6 years." Wren said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would not have been an insult. "Halavar Wren," he said, "it is on the wall. I want you to know the name." "I do know it," said Wren. He turned his head. "Third column, 11th from the bottom," she said. "Between Goro, Anik, and Ilsevit, Mari, I know all of them. I've been learning them since I got here. I'm slow with words, so it took a while." She swallowed. "I couldn't tell you why I started. It just seemed obscene that they were asterisk in a corridor, asterisk, and everybody walked past." The Kethani boy looked at her for a long moment in the gold-lit dark. Then he got up and walked away, and Wren thought she had said something wrong and put her head back down on her pack. 20 minutes later, he came back with 11 other cadets. They sat down around her in a loose ring on the ash, and they did not ask her for a speech, and they did not thank her, because it was much too early for that, and every one of them was still too frightened and too angry. They asked her to say the names. And Wren Calloway, 17 years old, hoarse as a crow, with her lungs full of sulfur and her boots full of grit, sat in the middle of a valley on a dead moon, and recited 52 names in alphabetical order to the people who were supposed to have been 53, 54, 60, and were not. It took 11 minutes. Nobody interrupted her. When she stumbled on the pronunciation of a Thal name in the 4th column, Sura Vaughn's slow voice came out of the dark behind her and gave it to her correctly, and Wren said it again, and got it right and went on. Afterwards there was a long silence. Then somebody said, "Say them again tomorrow," and somebody else said, "Yes." And that was how it became the thing it became, how 64 cadets walked 80 kilometers across the floor of the Halberd Valley, reciting the names of the dead once a night, out loud, on the open band, with a Concord evidentiary log recording every word of it in orbit. That was the recording that got out. Not the smile. The smile came later when they released the drone footage, and the smile was what everybody argued about on the feeds for a month. But it was the recording of a girl's ruined voice saying Adaran Sura, Belliquist Tomos, Chivchivnan asterisk, over and over, night after night, with 63 other voices joining in as they learned them, that landed on the desk of every member of the Concord Assembly Oversight Committee 11 days later. And it was that recording, an aide said afterward, that made the chairwoman put her head in her hands. They came up the scree ramp at Point Sarn on the morning of the 7th day. The extraction site sat on a broad shelf at the top of the ramp, above the yellow, back up in the gray and the wind. A landing pad, a mast, a prefab shelter, and the beacon itself. A squat orange pillar that every cadet at Sodalis had seen in 1,000 photographs and dreamed about for 1,000 nights. There were 3 lifters on the pad, engines idling, and a line of staff in cold weather gear across the top of the ramp, instructors, proctors, a medical team standing well back with their faces doing something complicated. And there was Proctor Adjutant Vel Thessarin, standing in front of the beacon with his stick planted on the rock and his crest bare to the wind. Wren came up the scree at the head of the column because they had made her, and she had argued, and Ket had said from her litter, in a voice that brooked nothing, "You will go first, Calloway, because if you go first they cannot pretend this was an accident." She stopped 10 meters from him. Behind her, coming up out of the honey-colored haze in a long, ragged line, 63 cadets climbed onto the shelf, filthy, coughing, sulfur-stained, half of them limping, 4 of them carried. They did not form up. Nobody gave the order and nobody wanted it. They just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming, and a Thal instructor at the far end of the staff line put a hand over her mouth. 64. The number was wrong. That was the thing nobody on the staff line could stop looking at. In 91 runnings of the trial of ascent, the number at Point Sarn had never once been the number at the drop, and no one standing on that shelf had ever in their professional lives seen a full cohort come out of Halberd, and the completeness of it was so alien that several of them simply stood there counting again. Wren pushed her faceplate up because she wanted him to see her face. "Proctor Adjutant," she said. Vel Thessarin looked at her. He looked, Wren thought, very old, older than he had looked under the banners. The wind moved his crest, and his hands on the stick were not entirely steady, and his eyes went past her, down the line, counting. "Cadet Calloway," his voice was hoarse. "You are disqualified from the trial of ascent. So is every candidate who left the mandated traverse. That is 64 candidates, the entire cohort. There will be no commissions from the 91st running." Somebody behind Wren made a small sound of pure rage. "Understood, sir," said Wren. That stopped him. "You misunderstand me," he said. "There will be no commissions, 4 years, every one of you, everything you have worked for." "I said understood, sir." Wren's voice was a rasp. It carried anyway. The wind was on her side for once. "Nobody's arguing with you. Look at them. Not one of them is arguing with you. You just told 64 18-year-olds that you've burned 4 years of their lives, and not one of them has said a word. And you should ask yourself why that isn't a victory." Thesarin's jaw moved. "You broke the covenant. You broke it first." "I have never." "You told us the air would kill us in 90 seconds, said Wren Calloway, "and you were carrying an instrument that could have proved it, and when I asked you to read us the number you went silent. On the emergency band, sir, which is sealed by statute, which means it is going to be read out loud in a room in front of people who are not frightened of you." She took one step forward. "I'm not accusing you of murdering 52 people. I don't think you did. I think that's almost worse. I think somebody wrote it down 61 years ago and nobody ever asked again. And it made the test asterisk hard asterisk. And hard was the asterisk point asterisk. And every single person who ever went down there and found out otherwise died on the way back up because you never gave them a rope." The wind screamed over the shelf. "I found a flat road down there, sir." She was shaking now, and she did not care. 80 kilometers of it with no wind at -9, running straight to this beacon. It has been there for 61 years. It was there when Yeren Voss froze at kilometer 62. It was there when Rin Halavar went off the north face. It was there for every single name on that wall asterisk, and the only thing standing between them and it was a paragraph. She stopped, breathed, her lungs crackled. "Take our commissions. Take mine twice. But you are going to have to explain to somebody why 64 disqualified cadets are standing on this shelf alive." Proctor Adjutant Vel Thesarin stood very still. He was, whatever else he was, not a stupid man. He had written 31 summaries in his own hand, and he had visited 9 families personally, and he had stood at the wall in the corridor at 3 in the morning more times than anyone alive knew about. He looked past Wren, down the long ragged line of coughing, filthy, upright children. He looked at the beacon. And then, in front of 64 cadets and 11 staff, and 3 drone feeds, and 1 sealed evidentiary log in orbit, Vel Thesarin turned to the medical team and said, "Get them inside, all of them. Full atmospheric panel on every candidate. And I want the drone spectrometry logs from the last 6 days pulled and sealed before anyone touches them." The senior medic hesitated. "Sir." "Sealed," said Thesarin. "Under my authority. Countersign it and log the time." He turned back and looked down at Wren Calloway, and his face was a ruin. "Because they are going to ask me why I did not read the number," he said, "and I am going to have to tell them the truth, which is that I did not need to because I already knew what it would say." The Concord Assembly Oversight Committee convened its inquiry into the 91st running of the trial of ascent in the Hall of Petitions on Keswick Prime, 41 days after the last cadet came up the scree at Point Sarn. It was supposed to take 3 sittings. It took 19. Wren Calloway spent the first 11 of them in a corridor. That was the part nobody put in the documentaries afterward. The corridor. Not the valley, not the wind, not the smile. The corridor outside the Hall of Petitions, with its gray carpet and its rows of hard chairs and its clock, where a 17-year-old girl in a borrowed dress, uniform 2 sizes too big, sat for 11 days with her hands in her lap, while adults in another room decided what she had done. They did not let her in. Sodalis had 11 lawyers and the Directorate of Cadet Formation had 14, and the cadets had one, a tired public advocate named HFY, who had taken the case because nobody else would and who told Wren on the first morning without cruelty, "Understand your position. You are not the plaintiff. You are the asterisk incident." What does that mean? It means they will not argue that the air is lethal. They cannot. The log says otherwise, and your friend Oduya encrypted it under his own key, which was either genius or the luckiest thing that has ever happened in conquered jurisprudence. Ron put her slate down. They will argue that the air is irrelevant, that the trial tests obedience under duress, that the mandated traverse was an order, that the order was lawful, and that 64 candidates disobeyed a lawful order and are therefore unfit. They will say you were correct and asterisk insubordinate, and that only one of those two facts is a qualification. "Will that work?" said Wren. HFY looked at the closed doors of the Hall of Petitions and said, honestly, "It has worked every time it has ever been tried." It nearly worked. The Directorate's case was excellent. Wren, reading the transcripts at night in a conquered dormitory that smelled of nothing at all, could feel how excellent it was, how it did not deny a single fact and did not need to. "Yes, asterisk," said the Directorate, "the survey was old. Surveys are old. That is the nature of surveys. Yes, the polysulfide channel in the cadet suits was an asserted value and not a measured one, a documented design decision, taken on cost grounds, regrettable, and it would be corrected. Yes, the valley was, in the narrow technical sense, survivable. But the traverse was not a suggestion. It was the exercise. The trial had never been a puzzle to be solved. It was a asterisk crucible asterisk, and a crucible with an exit is not a crucible. And if the conquered began commissioning officers who relitigated their orders in the field on the strength of a reagent strip, then the conquered would, in the fullness of time, lose ships. 52 dead cadets, said the Directorate's senior counsel, with genuine sorrow in his voice, and Wren believed the sorrow. That was the worst of it, were 52 tragedies. They were not a scandal. They were the price of a standard. And on the 14th day, they called Proctor Adjutant Vel Thessarin. He came into the Hall of Petitions with his stick, and he did not use it, and he sat down in the witness box in the full dress of a Proctor Adjutant of the Conquered with 4 decorations on his chest, and the senior counsel for the Directorate rose and asked him, gently, to describe the philosophy of the trial. Thessarin said, "Before I answer, I would like to enter a document." The counsel hesitated. "Adjutant, we have a schedule." "I would like to enter a document," said Vel Thessarin, "and I will not answer any question until I have." The document was 11 pages long. It was an internal technical memorandum, dated 11 years previously, produced by a junior drone technician of the Sodalis Range Support Section. A thal named Bessa Oron, aged 22, who had since left the service and was now running a hydroponics concern 900 light-years away, and had no idea any of this was happening. Technician Oron had been recalibrating an Overwatch drone sensor suite before the 80th running. In the course of doing so, she had switched on the atmospheric spectrometry channel, a standard fit on the airframe, and one which, the memo noted in the flat, aggrieved tone of a technician who has found something stupid, appears never to have been enabled on this range. She had then flown the drone down into the Halberd Valley, at 4 separate points along the traverse, and taken readings. 73 parts per million, 68, 77, 70. The memo's conclusion ran to 2 sentences. The atmospheric hazard figure in current use for this range is derived from Survey 61 Halberd ATMOS and does not match observed values by a factor of approximately 5. Recommend immediate resurvey and revision of all candidate briefing materials. It had been routed to the office of the Proctor Adjutant. It had been closed 9 days later, with a single line of annotation in a hand that everyone in the Hall of Petitions could see was Kessarin's own. Noted, no operational impact, traverse discipline unaffected, file. The Hall of Petitions was extremely quiet. Adjutant, said the chairwoman of the committee in the end, because nobody else would, do you understand what you have just given us? Yes, said Kessarin. Would you like to explain it? No, he said, but I am going to. He set his stick against the box. I read that memorandum 11 years ago in my office at 4 in the morning, he said, and I want the committee to understand that I did not feel guilt. I want that in the record, because it is the only useful thing I have to offer you, and it will be more useful than my remorse. I felt relief. If the valley was lethal, then the cadets we had lost had been killed by a moon. If the valley was survivable, then they had been killed by a rule, and I was the man who enforced the rule. So I did what a man does when the second thing is unbearable. I did not deny it. I filed it. I wrote 3 words and made it administrative, and administrative things do not scream at you in the night. He looked at his own hands. And I told myself something, and I believed it until 41 days ago. I told myself that even if the air was survivable, a cadet who went down into that valley would still die because they would have to climb out again, exhausted in the wind, without ropes, without stakes, without a route. And so the rule was still true in the only way that mattered. Do not go down. There is nothing down there for you. That was not a lie. That is the thing I have learned in 41 days that is worse than a lie. It was correct. There was no route down because we never built one. There were no ropes because we never hung them. There was no rescue because we had decided, as a matter of policy, 30 years before I ever set foot on Halberd, that rescue was contrary to the pedagogical value of the exercise. He raised his head. A 17-year-old girl went down that buttress in a storm on a rope she checked twice, with a sacrificial canister and a reagent strip, and a written procedure that she made her squadmate audit because she did not trust her own judgment. Then she came back up and hung strobes. That is the entire difference between us. She built the ladder. I had 11 years and a memorandum and a budget and the authority of the conquered, and it never once occurred to me to build the ladder, because I had already decided what the answer was. You are going to ask me whether the deaths were candidate error. I wrote that phrase 31 times in my own hand. I chose the words because they were true in the narrow sense asterisk, which is the most dangerous kind of true there is. They deviated. They could not recover. Every word of every summary I ever wrote is accurate, and every one of them is a lie, because I never once wrote the sentence that mattered, which is that they deviated because the ridge was killing them, and I had told them the only other road was death, and I had known for 11 years that it was not. 52 cadets, Madam Chairwoman, 31 of them mine. Their names are on a wall in a corridor between the mess hall and the launch bays where the traffic is heaviest, and I put it there myself deliberately so that no one could avoid it. I told myself that was courage. His voice did not break, but something behind it did. It was not courage. It was camouflage. You cannot see a thing that is always in front of you. 300 cadets a day walked past that slab and not one of them read it, and I knew that. And I let it stand, and in 11 months only one person in that entire academy ever stopped and read the names. She is sitting in your corridor. You have had her in a chair for 11 days. I would suggest you let her in. They let her in. She stood in the well of the Hall of Petitions in a uniform that did not fit, and the chairwoman of the Concord Assembly Oversight Committee, a thou woman of 190 with a face like weathered granite, asked her a single question. Cadet Calloway, the directorate has argued that you were correct and insubordinate, and that only correctness is not enough. What do you say to that? Wren had had 11 days in a corridor to prepare an answer. She had written 6 of them. She had crossed out all 6. Ma'am, she said, I'm not a philosopher, I'm from a station. So I'll tell you what a station teaches you, and then you can do what you like with me. On Coriolis 9, there's an alarm panel on every deck. And when I was 9, the one on Beering had been showing the same 3 green numbers for 6 years. And everybody walked past it 4 times a day. And 11 people died because the sensor behind it was dead in its socket, and nobody had ever asked it to prove it was still listening. My mother was one of the 11. The inquiry said it was a failure of individual vigilance among the residents. Ma'am, I have spent my whole life being told that the machine is fine and the people are the problem, and I have never once seen that be true. Not once. Every time it was the machine, and the machine was a piece of paper, and the piece of paper was asterisk old, and everybody was too proud or too busy or too certain asterisk to go and look. They keep saying I disobeyed an order. I did. I'd do it again this afternoon. But nobody in this room has said out loud what the order actually was. She looked up at the great curved bench of them. The order was don't check. That's all it was. Strip out the banners and the covenant and the crucible, and what's left is a man with an instrument in his hand, refusing to read the number out loud on an open channel, in a storm, to 64 children on a ridge. I didn't disobey a route. I disobeyed asterisk don't check. And if the conquered wants officers who will obey asterisk don't check, if that's the standard, if that's what the trial was asterisk for, then you don't want me and you never did, and you can have my commission and my 4 years and I'll go home and fix scrubbers. But you'll lose ships anyway, ma'am. You'll just lose them with the paperwork in order. The committee sat for 5 more days. The trial of assent was abolished by a vote of 9-2 in the 92nd year of its running, and the 2 dissents were entered on procedural grounds, and both of the dissenters said afterward that they had been wrong. The findings ran to 400 pages. The parts that mattered were short. The Halberd Range was resurveyed, properly, over 11 weeks, by a conquered scientific vessel, and the valley atmosphere was formally measured at a mean of 72 parts per million of a low-order sulfide compound, hazardous on prolonged exposure, scrubbable by any standard cartridge in under 15 seconds. The findings noted, in a sentence a great many people underlined, that this measurement had cost 11 weeks and a survey vessel, and that it could have been obtained at any time in the preceding 19 years by switching on an instrument the Academy already owned. The 52 incident summaries were reopened. Every one of them was amended. Cause of loss. Candidate error was struck from all 52 and replaced, after a long and bitter argument that went to the assembly floor, with a single sentence that Wren Calloway had proposed, and that the chairwoman insisted, over objections, be adopted in the cadets' own plain words. Cause of loss, institutional failure. The candidate was not at fault. The candidate was not told the truth. 52 families received a letter. 9 of them refused to accept it. 2 came to Keswick Prime and stood up in the Hall of Petitions and said things that were not printed in the record and should have been. Ket Anavar's brother read his amended summary at a kitchen table 900 light-years away, with his left hand shaking on the tabletop the way it had shaken for 9 years, and he put his head down on his arms and did not lift it for a long time. The Directorate of Cadet Formation was dissolved and reconstituted. Rector Odi Sennett resigned and made a statement about the currents of history, and nobody listened to it. Vel Thesserin was stripped of his rank, his decorations, and his pension, and was not prosecuted, because the committee could find no statute that he had actually broken, which fact appeared in the findings in bold as Recommendation 1. He did not appeal. He wrote to every one of the 31 families in his own hand, and the letters were not apologies, because he said an apology was a thing you asked for, and he had no right to ask for anything. They were accounts, exactly what he had known, and exactly when he had known it, and he did not spare himself a syllable. He lived another 9 years, and never gave an interview. Sodalis Academy did not close. That surprised people. Wren had thought it would. She had thought in the raw, furious weeks afterward that it should. But the chairwoman had said something to her in a side room, quietly on the last day, that Wren carried for the rest of her life. Burning it down is easy, child. It is also cheap. Anyone can be a fire. The hard thing, the thing that will cost you the next 40 years and every friend you have, is to stay inside it and make it tell the truth. 64 commissions were granted from the 91st running. They came with a formal finding, entered in each cadet's file, which said that the candidate had disregarded an order that was lawful in form and false in substance, and that the conquered was aware of the distinction, and that the conquered had chosen. The trial was replaced with an exercise the cadets nicknamed the audit, which was not survival at all. Candidates were dropped on a range with a written brief, and the brief contained an error, a real one, seeded by the examiners, different every year, and the entire exercise was whether they found it. There were ropes. There were sensors that measured things instead of asserting them. There were rescue lifters on 20-minute standby, and the standby was written into the regulations in a paragraph that could not be waived, and the paragraph was numbered 52. Nobody had to explain the number. And the wall came out of the corridor. They moved it, the whole basalt slab, uncut, unchanged, 52 names in their bloodless alphabetical order, into the vaulted hall where the banners were, and they took down 11 of the banners to make room for it, and they put it at the head of the room so that no cadet could be sworn in without standing in front of it. They changed the inscription. The old one, the one about being not diminished, was ground off, and what went up in its place was 11 words long and had been written by a 17-year-old girl with a stylus on the back of her own hand, in a corridor, while she waited for adults to decide what she was. They were not careless. They were lied to. Read the NAMES. And every cadet does, out loud. All 52, at the swearing, before they are given anything at all. And the ones who stumble on the thal names are corrected, patiently, by an enormous gray instructor named Vaughn, who has been teaching high-gravity movement at Sodalis for 30 years, and who has never once raised her voice. The drone footage was released in the 7th week, because the committee released everything, and it played on every feed in the Concord for a month, and it is still played. 2 seconds of it mostly. A shelf of black rock 180 meters below a killing ridge, golden haze rolling past in enormous slow folds. A floodlight pinning a very small figure in a cadet suit, alone, with a reagent strip in one hand, while a voice from the sky tells her she has 90 seconds of life and it is watching her spend them. And the figure stands up, unhurried, and turns her faceplate into the lens. They argued about that smile for years. The Directorate's counsel called it contempt. A columnist called it the coldest expression ever recorded on a human face. 100,000 people who had never lost anyone to anything decided they knew exactly what a 17-year-old girl had been feeling on a rock in a valley on a dead moon. They were all wrong, and Wren Calloway only ever answered it once, decades later, when she was old and gray-cropped, and had a Concord Safety Directorate named after her mother, and a reputation for asking questions that ruined people's afternoons. A young cadet asked her, shyly, at the wall in the vaulted hall, whether it was true that she had smiled when she found out. "I smiled at him," said Wren. "Not at them. Never at them. 52 people died on that ridge, and there is nothing in it to smile about, and there never will be." She looked up at the slab, at all those small restrained letters, and she was quiet for a moment. "But I'd been asking for 11 months, she said, "and every single time they told me I was slow, or young, or a girl from a station who didn't understand what an asterisk institution was. And then I knelt down on that rock and the strip went pale rose and the number came back 71, and I knew right then, before I'd even stood up, that I was going to lose everything I had, and that it wouldn't matter because it was asterisk written down now asterisk, and you cannot unwrite a number. She smiled the same smile, older, no warmer. So I looked up into the lens, said Wren Calloway, and I let him see it, because he'd spent 40 years teaching children that the truth was fatal, and I wanted him to watch it save every single one of us.